Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to be going over everything you need to know about using Better Bend in Blender. I'll be covering the basic principles of Better Bend and how it works, the main idea behind it, and then I'm going to go over some examples and some exercises to show you what it looks like in action and how you can make some pretty cool effects. So yeah, let's get into it. So Better Bend has a lot of inputs, but once you understand the main idea behind it, it becomes a lot more straightforward. The main concept here is that you define a region and an orientation, and that tells Better Bend where the bend should be and which direction it should go. The region is called the capture region, and it starts at a single point, the capture origin. From this point, Better Bend looks for points in a single direction, the capture direction, and the user defines this. I like to think of this as like a ruler extending into space measuring your object. What's important here is that we're only measuring points along the ruler. Better Bend doesn't care how far that point is in any other direction. Now we also need to define something called the capture length, which is basically the length of the ruler. Points closer to the origin will bend less, points farther will bend more, and once they reach the end of the ruler, it'll hit its max. So now Better Bend knows which points to bend and how much, but it still doesn't know which way to bend them. That's what the up direction is for. It basically tells Better Bend which way the bend should go. You can also choose whether the ruler works in one direction or both directions from the origin, and whether the bending should stop at the end of this ruler or just continue forever. In my opinion, once you understand this ruler idea, using Better Bend becomes a lot easier. Alright, so now that we've gone over some of the basics of Better Bend, I'm going to take you through some examples in Blender. So let's go. First off, I've got this plane here. I subdivided it a couple times. It looks like this. Yeah, and I've already appended my Better Bend modifier, so I'm going to go ahead and add it in here. Type in Better Bend, and there we go, we got the gizmo. Now, I'd like to bend this at the corner here, and to do that, we're going to need to switch the these directions so they line up properly. So the capture direction, that's going to need to face somewhat up, and the up direction should face out. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So if we go to the modifier stack over here, let's see, I'll change the capture direction to be positive on the z-axis. So that should be 0x, 0y, and 1z. All right, that's good. And now the blue arrow, the up direction, that should be pointing out from the plane. So that's in the x-axis. So I'm going to set this to, I'm going to copy 1 here, paste it here, and then copy the 0 and paste it there. All right, so the directions are more or less correct. Now I can use this blue gizmo here. This is the capture rotation. You can see it's changing over here. Moving this around just kind of makes adjustments to where the capture direction is facing. So I'm going to go ahead and face it just towards the corner over here. Something like that. Looks good. And I'm going to drag the origin up to the corner so it doesn't bend the whole thing. And if we want to really get this right, we can actually turn on the Show Original Geometry option. And that'll give us like a little preview of what the geometry looks like before we start bending it. So yeah, we can line up this this capture length here so that it goes just to the edge of the plane, and that way we don't get any kind of like straightening out like you see right there. So I'm going to get this all the way to like the edge of the plane, more or less. We can also just disable limit to capture region. We don't have to worry about this. But you know, if you want to do it the proper way, this is this is how you do it. So that looks good. I'm going to turn off Show Original Geometry, and now we can just bend this corner how we like, maybe change the direction just a little bit. So that looks good. I'm going to bend this corner now. So I'm actually going to add another Better Bend modifier inside here. I'm going to actually, I'm going to disable this drop down so that it minimizes. And I'm going to go ahead and type Better Bend again. Now we have a new one. Same thing. I'm going to point the capture direction down. So let's go copy, paste, and this should be negative. So put that down. And the blue arrow, the up direction should be pointing out again. So same thing as last time, copy, paste, copy, paste. Same thing as before, we're just gonna adjust this, drag it out. We can turn off limit to capture region so we don't have to worry about dealing with the capture length. And we're just gonna drag it out to the corner. Maybe we can give this one a little bit more bend than the last one. So I'll really curl it in and I'll take it all the way to the corner here. Something like that. Okay, cool. All right, and finally, we can bend this whole thing. So we've got these 2 bends in the corner, but we can bend the whole geometry after all this. And that gives it kind of a nice little effect. So I'm going to add one more Better Bend. It looks all weird because the gizmos aren't set up properly. This one, I'm going to point this capture direction up and the up direction out. Okay, so that looks good. This is bending in the right way now. But I want this to bend both sides. So I'm actually going to come over here and I'm going to turn on both directions. So now it's bending both directions symmetrically. And I don't want it to straighten out like this, so I'm going to turn off limit to capture region, or I can just drag this out here if I wanted. But I'm actually going to just turn that off. And let's go just like a slight little curl on itself. And there we go. And if we want to switch between these gizmos, we can just come over here to the modifier stack, and then anytime we select one of these modifiers, the better bend modifiers, it's going to switch to that gizmo. So yeah. All right, next thing I want to go over is kind of like the unraveling and rolling effect that I used in some of my demonstrations. And that's actually really easy to set up. So I'm going to show you how to do it right now. So I've got another plane here. This one's subdivided again. I'm going to add my better bend. And this time the gizmos are lined up pretty well because it's on the XY plane. So that's fine. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to point the capture direction just slightly into the plane. So I'm going to take this green gizmo, and since you can't see the gizmos while you're changing one of the gizmos, I'm actually going to come over here and tweak the value. So you can see if I change this, it's changing the bend rotation parameter here. So I'm just going to point this down a little bit. Down, just like that, just slightly. And now you'll see if I turn off limit to capture region again, if I increase the angle, you can see it's like curling in on itself. And the further down the capture direction points into the plane, the more severe this like curling effect is going to look. So if I like take this gizmo and play with this, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. And if you increase the bend angle, you can really start to see it. Yeah, now that you've got this basic setup, you can basically just take the capture origin and move it along the capture direction. And that's how you get this unrolling effect. And it's really easy to set up, very versatile. And you can make all kinds of adjustments. Like we can change the direction easily, and it works just as well. We can make it less tight, and that works too. And yeah, so very easy unrolling animation. You can set this up. You basically just have to animate the capture direction component of the capture origin like this. You can give it a little flare even, and you can animate the angle as well while it's unrolling, and that looks cool. You can also add another bend. This one I wanna bend it kind of like a bent tube. I don't know. But I'm gonna point the capture direction up basically. You'll see what I'm talking about on the y-axis. Yeah. Okay, there we go. All right, so now I can kind of curl this like a bent tube or something, and the old like unraveling animation setup that we created still works. See, it's just that now on top of that we have this this extra bending. So yeah, you can get a lot done with animation and maybe like even modeling by stacking these bend modifiers. All right, so now I want to move on to bending multiple objects. So this is something that used to be a little bit difficult to do before I made a couple of changes to Better Bend. Now it's a lot more simple, and I'm going to show you how it works. For one, I've got a collection here of objects. I just model these real quick. They're just like basic circular discs or whatever with some good topology. And there's a few of them. They're solidified and they're just stacked on top of each other like this. And most importantly, they're all in their own collection. You can see here they're in their own bend collection. And I want to disable this for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a primitive. Let's go with a monkey, and we'll give this a new geometry nodes tree. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to drag in our collection. So I got it here. And if I Alt-Shift-clicked with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, this will go straight to the output, and I can see what I've got. So my objects are here. That looks good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the children so that each object is, well, its own object. I don't want these to be treated as like one instance, if that makes sense. So I'm going to separate the children, and let's go ahead and add in our Better Bend. Okay, I like to make this a little wider so I can see the options better. And right now this is this could be what you're going for, right? I mean, you got your collection here and your objects, and you can bend it all as if it's one object, but oftentimes when you're bending multiple objects, you don't want to treat this as one object. So what we've actually got to do is we got to come over here and change this from single object to instances. And now Better Bend is going to treat each object in the collection as its own instance, its own object that is going to have its own origin, and it's going to bend them as if it were in the middle of that object. So this looks a little weird and, you know, not very exciting. But one common use for this is that you might want to have different objects bending at a different angle. And that's really easy to do with this setup. So what we can do is we can add a capture attribute node, set it to instances, and we're going to capture the index of the collection. So each object in the collection is going to have its own index. So like this might be 0, this will be 1, 2, 3, etc. So now that we've captured that index, we're going to use it to control the bend angle. And now we got something pretty exciting already. It's each object's bending with a different angle from the last one. As we connect inputs to the sockets on Better Bend, we're going to lose some of the gizmos that we set up. Like right now, we've lost the angle gizmo. If I disconnect this, see, it comes back, but if we connect it, it's gone. And since a lot of these gizmos depend on each other, you might lose gizmos just by connecting things that you weren't expecting. So just keep that in mind. That is something that happens when you're working like this inside of geometry nodes. But yeah, if you want to make adjustments to this, you can still use the show original geometry. And now instead of showing the entire collection like it would if it were a single object like this, what it'll do is it'll just show one of the instances in your collection. And you can use that to figure out, you know, where your capture length should be, where your origin should be. And yeah, it just makes it really easy to get your settings right before you start animating stuff or bending your objects. All right, let's move on. I'll move this to the side. Another thing I want to do is I want to show you how you can procedurally generate your own instances instead of using a collection and then bend those instances inside of geometry nodes. So let's go ahead and add in an icosphere. Looks pretty good. We're going to give this a new geometry nodes tree, and we're going to distribute points on the faces of the sphere. Something like this. I'm going to change this to Poisson disk. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, I'm not going to lie. And I'm going to increase this distance min so they're not really colliding too much. And what I want to do is I want to instance some grids on each of these points. So I'm going to get a grid here and an instance on points. And I'm going to instance every grid on one of these points. Cool. And another thing I'm going to do is I want to align these so that each plane is facing out from the sphere. So I'm going to take an align rotation to vector node, and I'll align each plane to the normal of the sphere. So I'll take that, align the vector, and it should be the z-axis because that's the normal of the plane. And we're going to connect that to rotation. All right, so they're a little too big, so I'm going to go ahead and make them a little smaller. It's pretty good. And we need way more vertices here. So I'm going to collect these here, and I'm going to set this to like, say 20. That looks pretty good. All right, so we have a bunch of subdivided grids now on our sphere. And all right, now let's bend these instances. So we can add in our Better Bend. I'll make this wider. And again, this is treating this all as one object right now, which again, this might be what you're going for. Another option here is pre-realized, by the way. This is like there's very few instances where I think you'd want to disable this. This basically makes sure that like if you have a bunch of instances and you're treating them as a single object, that the whole geometry gets realized and that all the points become real geometry for bending. If you turn this off, you'll see that it kind of like acts weird. And really it's just bending, it's just changing the positions of the instances themselves because it's treating the instances as each one as their own individual point. If that makes sense. But usually you just want to, you know, bend the object like normal. But anyway, we want to switch this to instances. So we're bending each instance individually. And it's kind of hard to see what's going on. And the reason is because we have our capture length very far from where the edge of the instance should be. So if we go to show original geometry, again, it's going to show one of the instances at the origin with reset transformations and everything. So we can see this is what one of the instances looks like. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to drag the capture length so that it's roughly on the edge here. And that way when we mess around with the rotation, it's more responsive. That looks cool. I'm going to go ahead and enable both directions so that now it's bending in both directions. And immediately we've got a lot of control over a lot of separate objects bending at the same time, which is pretty cool. But we can do things a lot cooler with this. We can take any information about the instances and use that to drive their bending. So for example, let's say I want to give each grid a random bending angle. We can do that pretty easily if we give a random value to each instance and then use that to drive the angle input here. So I'm going to take a capture attribute node, set it to instance. I'm going to get a random value and I'm going to capture it here. And I'm going to set this between 0 and TOF, which is 2 pi. That's like 360 degrees basically in radians. So it's going to give a random value between 0 and 360 degrees to each instance. And I'm going to use that to drive the angle. And now look what we got. We could also take this and give it to the capture rotation. So now they're bending with the same angle, but in different directions. See, like some of them are like diagonal, some of them are more straight. Yeah, we can take this even further too though. Let's say we want to have these open up at the bottom and then as it gets to the top, they kind of curl in on themselves. We can actually capture the position this time instead of some random value. So let's add another capture attribute, change this to instance, and this time we're going to capture the position. All right, so now we have the position of each instance and we're going to separate this out so that we only get the Z. So we separate the Z and we'll connect this to the angle. And it's kind of hard to tell what's going on because we haven't mapped this correctly, but right now in the middle where Z is 0, we don't have any bending, and towards the edges, you can see it's kind of bending more. But we're going to map range this, and I'm going to set this between from -1 to 1. So that's like from the bottom of the sphere to the top. We'll change this from 0 to, I don't know, somewhere around here. That's about 2 pi. And now you can see like at the bottom, these planes aren't bending pretty much at all. And as we get to the top, they're bending all the way. And they're kind of overlapping with each other. Or with themselves, I should say. So I'm going to turn off limit to capture region so they don't straighten out and they just bend. I'm also going to shade these smooth because it looks kind of choppy right now. But yeah, this is a pretty cool effect right off the bat. And we could even make this cooler. We can add a math node and then add a value to this so we can animate it over time. And yeah, I kind of like this effect. But yeah, we can use all kinds of parameters from the instances to control any one of these these sockets. And that's really the power of Better Bend, is just like how well it fits into procedural workflows and with doing several things with one, set of instructions. And yeah. Okay, one more thing I wanted to mention. So you might have noticed that when you switch this from single object to instances, you get this extra option here, apply instance scale. This is on by default. Yeah, basically what this does is if you were to like scale your instances either in here manually or like with some other function, the bending kind of scales with the object, if that makes sense. And the reason is because like if we come back here to show original geometry, if this is enabled, apply instance scale, it's kind of like when you apply scale in any other situation in Blender where you're applying the scaling effects to the transformations to the object, and then any other deformations you do afterwards are going to apply to that. So that's why we get this effect here. But if you don't want this and you kind of want these to look just how they are except bigger or smaller, you can turn this off. So you can turn off apply instance scale, and now if we scale these instances, they're just going to become bigger or smaller versions of themselves. All right, that is about all I have for you today on Better Bend. If you haven't gotten Better Bend yet and you want to, or if you just want to download the latest version, the link will be in the description. You can go and check that out. If you have any questions or feedback regarding Better Bend, leave a comment below and I'll get back to you when I can. All right, thanks for watching and good luck.